Okay. Hi, everyone. Very excited for our talk today at the Oxford University Space and Astronomy Society. I'm Hannah, your president, and I'm very delighted to have a very special guest with us here today, Simonetta Di Pippo. So to introduce our speaker, Director Simonetta Di Pippo is the head of the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs and is an astrophysicist by training. She holds honorary doctorates in international affairs and environmental studies. She previously served as the director of human spaceflight at the European Space Agency. Simonetta is also a member of the International Academy of Astronautics and the World Economic Forum Global Future Council on Space Technology. And also, very interesting fact, there is an asteroid named after Simonetta called Di Pippo. So very delighted to have you here with us today. Thank you so much for your time. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on the UN's role in space sustainability. So without further delay, I'll hand over to you. I will share the slides.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, as we say in space when we talk to astronauts in orbit, loud and clear.
So let me just get your slides up for you.
So really, thank you very much for this opportunity. And I'll try to provide you with an overview of the activities that we do. And clearly, my presentation today will be focusing on the role of the Office for Outer Space Affairs at the United Nations, looking at the side of sustainability. And when we talk about sustainability, we mean both looking at the sustainable planet and at the same time the sustainability of other space activities, because there are two sides of this topic when we talk about, in particular, long-term sustainability. Anna, would you please so kind to next slide, please? So just a brief overview of the Office for Outer Space Affairs. You can consider us as the UN home of space. We are part of the UN Secretariat, which means that my boss is the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, and we report to the General Assembly, which means that we deal with the 193 member states of the United Nations. We are the only entity in the UN fully dedicated to space affairs, and we work with a range of partners from across the space sector. So we have quite a broad range of stakeholders. So national governments, national and regional space agencies, private entities, civil society, including academia and NGOs, and also other UN entities which may need to get support from space to fulfill their own mandates, both in always in Vienna, New York, Geneva, and also in the field. And one of the angles or the perspective I'm always taking into account is the fact that when we do our activities, when we perform our activities, I always looking at it from the side of fostering innovation, and in doing so, I'm always looking at diversity and also at all the possible integrated efforts with partnerships, with the networking and the cooperation, which all these elements, partnerships, networking, and cooperation, which are at the core of our activities. The next one, please. So this is just a list of top-level activities we do, or top-level, say, main guidelines, and are here listed in particular also because if you want then to have a look at the PowerPoint presentation after my my speech here, you have everything in writing. So one side of the story is that we serve member states in our function as being the secretariat of the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. As I said, we work with member states, IGOs and NGOs. we have certain number of programs associated to us, even if the overall program that we manage is called Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. Below, we have other programs like the Program on Space Application, the Register of Space Objects, SPIDER program, which is dealing with disaster management and emergency response, the International Committee on Global Navigation Satellite System, where we put together all the stakeholders in this field. And also on planetary defense, we are the Secretariat of Space Mission Planning Advisory Group. Each of these activities would require a certain number of minutes to discuss and to present it in details. But I'll focus on certain topics only in this presentation. But if you, after that, want to have more information, you can always get in touch with us and we can provide you with more information on the topics you may be interested in. Next one, please. So in order to summarize, just with few keywords, the role of the Office for Outer Space Affairs, in general, we could say that we are here to support member states, and we support member states let's say with a variety of different activities and in different manners. So overall, you can consider the office as a capacity builder. So we provide access to cutting-edge space data and information, and we help building capacity, in particular for developing and emerging countries, so that through the use of this data, they can accelerate the sustainable development in their country. We are also a convener. In a way, we are a platform to facilitate international cooperation among UN member states, also to develop new space policies. And we are also, in a way, the platform for bringing all the stakeholders together so that there is an exchange of views, opinion, interests, requirements, needs. It's not only the UN dealing with member states, with the government on one side, but it's really trying to bring all the stakeholders at the same table, in particular when we talk about sustainability, because all the stakeholders need to be fully aware of the importance of following the rules to maintain the long-term sustainability in outer space activities. And then last but not least, we are a sort of a gateway. We are the door in the UN system for space affairs. We coordinate all the UN activities using space-related technologies to support sustainable development. And the picture that you see here is the place where we live, is the Vienna International Center, located in Vienna, and that's the campus of the UN, where I am based. So as I said, in a way, we are the hub for space affairs solutions. We are for sure at the center of development and implementation of all the legal regime in outer space through the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. UN treaties and principles on outer space have been adopted by the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, and after that to the United Nations General Assembly. The committee is reporting to the GA. And really, these are really at the center of the global, what we call global space governance. COPUOS also provides a forum for debating peaceful uses of space now since 6 decades. The point is that, as you know, that both the office and the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space have been created in '58 and started to become operational in '59. So exactly at the beginning of the space era. So we have been following the entire development of in the field. And also, as I mentioned already, we facilitate multilateral exchanges and work to advance international cooperation in space. And clearly, what I'm always saying is that we, the space community, we are jointly responsible for our behavior in space. And if we all the stakeholders follow the book of the rules, I mean, the rules of the road, and act to sustain this unique environment, also for the benefit of the next coming generations, this is really the best way to preserve this global common and to work together in also to maintain peace, not only in space, but also on Earth. The next one, please. I mentioned already that COPIOS was established in 59, and it was when we started operations, also with the Office for Outer Space Affairs. The committee itself, you see in this picture, the countries which are members of the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. Currently, there are 95. And in reality, we started with 18 at the very beginning. Now we are 95 and counting. We have already several other applications for new members this year. So I hope we can reach 100. One element to consider that even if we reach 100 this year, is already more or less half of the United Nations member states. So it's still a long way to go. But you also see that the countries which are already members cover most of the Earth. And still there is a lot to be done in the African region, as you can see from the picture. As I mentioned, the committee is the forum for developing the international space law. The 5 treaties and 5 principles were approved long time ago. And on top of that, we have the so-called space debris mitigation guidelines and also the guidelines on the long-term sustainability of outer space activities, which were approved. The first 21 guidelines have been approved just a couple of years ago, and are in a way a milestone, have to be considered as a milestone in the process of looking at the long-term sustainability worldwide. Important to notice, as I said, that the committee membership, while continues to expand, represents now over 6 billion people. And then just for completeness, the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space has 2 subcommittees, one dealing more with the legal activities, so the legal subcommittee, and then the other one more technical and scientific, so the scientific and technical subcommittee. On top of the 95 member states, members of the committee, we currently reached 42 permanent observers. So as you can imagine, every time we have a meeting, we have a lot of people in the room. Next one, please. This is quite an interesting graph because you see it starts from 57, because 57 is the year where Sputnik was launched, the 4th of October, 57, so the first ever satellite in orbit. You see from 1 in 57, we had in 2020 satellites registered in our register 1,265. And if you look at 2019, in reality, it was 581. So it was doubling. You see the trend is really going quite quite steep. And at the moment in which I did this graph, so a few days ago, we had already 83 satellites launched in 2020. The difference is that at the very beginning of the space era, the missions were considering 1 or maximum 2 payloads, 2 satellites per launch. Now, with the development of these mega constellations, with the fact that the spacecrafts are smaller and smaller, clearly the number of satellites that you can launch in the same mission is increasing. We had, for example, an Indian launcher, PSLV, a couple of years ago, which launched more than 110 satellites just in one shot. So it's clear that the miniaturization of the satellites, and at the same time the increasing in number of potential launchers available, because there are more and more activities on the commercial side, not only on the public side. Well, this is bringing the numbers very high, and as you can imagine, this has an impact on the long-term sustainability. If we look at the situation on the current, the current space developments, the trends, I would say. Here I divided the situation in a way, the description, in 3 blocks: science and tech, economy, and legal and policy. Well, we said already that the number of objects in space is growing. That we had more than 1,200 satellites launched in 2020. We have close to 3,000 active satellites, and you probably heard, for example, Starlink, this constellation, mega constellation developed by SpaceX. Well, they have already 12,000 satellites approved for launch. So the more they continue to launch, the more this number of active satellites in orbit will increase rapidly. There are also some new technologies, such as debris removal or mission extension services, are under development in different countries. I mentioned already that indeed the number of member states is increasing, and with that is also increasing the number of member states which have had access at least once in the history of their nation, access space with at least one satellite. Still, there are more than half of the UN member states which didn't yet reach the orbit. And then also the question of having more and more stakeholders, also on a commercial basis, which are able to develop and launch space hardware. If we look at the situation from the economy standpoint, we know that these are figures which are quite well known, but okay, let me in any case underline them because quite important. Currently, the space economy is valued at over $400 billion, and the projections in 2040s is between 1 and 3 trillion. The commercial space activities are rapidly growing, and currently they represent about 80% of the overall value. There is a tendency of private companies to enter into the domain of, what was the domain of governments in the past, because when technologies become mature, then this is always happening. It happened with SATCOMs, it is happening with Earth observation satellites, and it is happening now for activities and operations in low Earth orbit. And it's now also something taking shape for Moon and Mars exploration. Important also to notice that satellites contribute to more than 10% of the GDP in the EU, Germany, UK. And also, we strongly believe that satellites and space in general, space activities in general, will be instrumental for the post-COVID-19 recovery, and also to push towards a greener economy. If we look at the legal and policy aspect, clearly there are a lot of discussions around this new way of doing things, in particular what is called the new space. There is a stronger and stronger attention to safety and security, plus sustainability. There is a need of an increased international cooperation. The more we cooperate, the better it is. And also it's extremely important that all the stakeholders, as I already mentioned 3 or 4 times, that all the stakeholders understand and implement the international space law. because this is important really also to preserve space for the others. And last but not least, the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space is currently discussing what is called Space 2030, which is a strategy document that member states are putting together in order to guide the activities, their own activities until 2030. Why 2030? Because it's the milestone of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. But it's also one important milestone for the COP21 Paris Climate Change Agreement. So for climate action, 2030 is really an important milestone. And so this is what member states are currently discussing, the strategy called Space 2030. Next one, please. I mentioned already 2 or 3 times mega constellations. Clearly, they offer immense opportunities for a variety of industries, especially for global internet connection. So it's an extremely important tool to bridge the digital divide. Clearly, this also poses some challenges because this huge number of satellites can increase collision risks. Space traffic management becomes absolutely indispensable. And also we see an increased number of satellites which have to be registered. And clearly this is putting a lot of pressure on our shoulders. We have something close to 60,000 new satellites ready to be launched or planned to be launched in the next few years. And clearly we have a great concern with respect to what we call the proliferation of space debris, so space junk. Next one, please. Clearly, the more objects you have in orbit, the more you will see the increase in probability of conjunctions. And collisions in space can really be extremely dangerous. And so, as you can imagine, tracking these objects is extremely important also to preserve operators, satellite operators, and preserve their own assets in space. And also, there are several studies which predict that a major collision could cause a chain reaction, creating a situation in orbit which could preclude space activities for decades. Clearly, the posed risks are in terms of damaging active satellites, potential issues for human spaceflight, in particular astronauts living in the International Space Station or in the China Space Station soon. And also there is a bit of threat for sure towards deep space missions, but also if we look at Earth. There are some also issues related to the fact that currently there is no system in the world able to track each single debris. The system which are in place already are covering or are tracking most of the objects in space, but not all. And so sometimes we may face a situation, we may face a situation where we don't know that, for example, a group of small debris is coming and potentially on the wrong trajectory, and potentially in a hitting trajectory with the International Space Station, for example. So what happens very often is that the NASA and Roscosmos, they are instructing their astronauts to go into the capsules that they have on board as vehicles to come back on Earth in case they are impacted by small debris, for example, which could create some troubles to their life on the station, for example. The next one. The UN, we have been always let's say, trying to keep track of this activity. The Scientific and Technical Subcommittee started to discuss this item officially in 1994. In 2007, the space debris mitigation guidelines were approved. And clearly, more and more, there are activities linked to the possibility to do active debris removal. You see here a couple of videos. One is a solution proposed by the University of Surrey, and the other one, the one with the net, is one of the possible solutions studied by the European Space Agency. And with the active debris removal technology, the aim is really to clean up orbits in order to have space activities more sustainable and space available for future generations. There are a lot of issues: registration, lack of legal instruments to regulate active debris removal, jurisdictions over objects. So this you can understand immediately why this is one of the topics on which the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space is focusing, because there are still a lot of issues to be solved, even if in parallel the technology for active debris removal is developed in different countries, in a certain number of spacefaring countries. The next one, please. We compiled a compendium of space debris mitigation standards implemented by states. We also maintain the list of all the items which have been recovered on Earth under the rescue agreement. It's one of the agreements that I was mentioning before. We signed joint statements with both the European Space Agency and the government of Japan. And just yesterday, we started, by the way, an awareness campaign together with the European Space Agency. So if you go on our website, you can find more information. And this activity of increasing awareness is really to bring all the stakeholders at the same table, so that really we can support better the implementation of the existing guidelines, strengthen international cooperation, increase awareness, etc. Next one, please. Clearly, from our standpoint, we believe that the UN is a so unique platform with a high convening power that stakeholders should use, should really benefit from this. It's also clear that we do need an effective governance of space, and the committee on one side and us on the other side, we are really there to help. Following the rules of the road is mandatory, in our opinion, for all the stakeholders, the member states themselves, so the governments, but also all the other stakeholders. And so in order to really give a possibility for everyone to say a word, we created the UN World Space Forum. And every year we engage with all the stakeholders on different topics. This year will be focusing on climate action, and we really give a platform to the private sector, NGOs, academia, research centers, and the civil society, the scientists, the citizen scientists, to express their opinions, so that we can collect all the requirements, needs, and information, and then provide more informed documents for proper decision making for member states in COPUS. Clearly, we encourage a lot information and data sharing, because the more we do that, the more we increase trust and confidence. And for sure, it will be mandatory to develop the global rules for space traffic management, and it will be absolutely mandatory to do this with us, with the UN. The next one, please. If we now look at the situation, I mean, where space is right now, well, every single day we use plenty of satellites, even if not necessarily we know or we are fully aware of this. And it can be used, I mean, space activities are helping the research, are helping to really sustainable development, disaster management, climate, etc. So humanitarian aid, so agriculture, food and water security, biodiversity, immigration, whatever. There is no field or challenge that humanity has to face right now where space is not important. Next one, please. And so in a way, we see space as an agent of change. And if we look at the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, I would like to focus your attention on the fact that 3 years ago now, together with the European GNSS agency, we made a very detailed study. We analyzed the 169 targets underpinning the SDGs, and we combine Earth observation satellites and GNSS, Global Navigation Satellite Systems. And we made a very careful evaluation of all the 169 targets, and we found that more or less 40% are reliant on geolocation and Earth observation, which means that 40% of the targets can only be matched, can only be reached with space. I have to tell you that in my opinion, even if this study was done with us, we accepted to be very conservative in the evaluation, and also we didn't consider SATCOMs and as part of the technologies in doing the study. And so if you add SATCOMs to that, and you easily reach 50 or even 60%. In any case, even if we stay at 40%, you see that it's a very high figure, which means that there is no policy or decision making all over the world in any place which can be done without space. If on top of that, we consider that 50 out of the 54 essential climate variables, which are the variables defined by the scientific community to measure the climate change and the climate change parameters, well, more than half of these essential climate variables can only be monitored from space, which means that probably what we should do collectively is to get the decision and policy makers to understand that without space, climate cannot be tackled. The issue related to climate change cannot be tackled because we need to understand first exactly what is happening. And in order to do so, as I said, more than half of the essential climate variables can only be understood and monitored from space. This is something absolutely key also for the future. Next one, please. Just to link the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development to the activities of the Office for Outer Space Affairs, you know that this agenda was approved in September 2015 by the General Assembly. These goals, all member states committed to try to reach these goals by 2030. And what the office did was to remap all the activities that we were having at that time, the projects and activities initiatives. And also we planned the future activities starting from 2015 onwards, trying to match better and better the SDGs. So we created new initiatives and new projects more linked to the SDGs. And I'll provide you with some examples in just a few seconds. Next one, please. Okay, I'm not going in detail, but just to say that there are a lot of links between Earth benefits and applications of space linked to the SDGs. For sure, we can monitor desertification, deforestation, wildlife migration, We can work in telemedicine and telehealth, population mapping, distribution of medication, treatment of disease. We can support prevention and mitigation of climate change, weather prediction, illegal fishing, water management, controlling water quality. We can work hard on quality education and gender equality, and we have a dedicated project which is covering SDG number 4 and 5, space for women. And then we can monitor and improving road traffic, safety and navigation. There is a huge impact of space activities on smart cities, etc., etc. I could really continue for 24 hours. I just put here a certain number of hooks for you, but again, this is just a very short summary of all the things that can be done through space linked to the 17 SDGs. Next one, please. And when we talk about capacity building, these are the projects that we have been creating from scratch, at least most of them, and they were not existing before. The only one which was existing before 2015 was UN Spider, because it's a program approved in 26 by the General Assembly, and is dealing, as I said, with disaster management and emergency response. All the other projects that you see here have been created after 2015. And it's really linked, and each of them is linked to a certain number of SDGs, plus also to some strategies of member states. You can imagine space for climate action, for example, space for women, space economy in particular in the post-COVID-19 recovery phase. In reality, also the International Committee on GNSS was created before 2015. But what we did with this was to really reinforce its activities because we thought was extremely important. And just an example, space for water was not existing before, but then we saw that we didn't have a project dedicated, initiative dedicated to SDG number 6, which is clean water and sanitation, clean water and sanitation. And so we created space for water. There is a portal where we put together the space and the water communities, and there is this cross-fertilization between the two communities, and with the main goal of being a repository of all the information available on how space can help the water community. Next one, please. And in particular on the project called Access to Space for All, which started in 2018. These are the partners that we currently have. As you see, we have space agencies, quite big space agencies, because we have NASA, we have Japan, we have the European Space Agency, and China Manned Space Agency. Then we have an interesting first set of private sector entities, Airbus, Avio, and Sierra Nevada Corporation. And then we have a research center, which is the German Aerospace Center, and ZARM, where they have a drop tower to simulate 20-22 seconds of microgravity. And then the Keldysh Institute of Applied Mathematics. It's quite a recent partner, and is Russian, and they're working with us on astronomy and providing telescopes, for example, to, in particular, developing and emerging countries. So it's really, this is providing the full set of possibilities, from experiments on board the space station, for example, Airbus, the China space station, Japan, and NASA will help us in bringing experiments and satellites to the space station, to the space stations, because the China Manned Space Agency is targeting the China space station. Avio is allowing us to launch CubeSats from developing and emerging countries. Sierra Nevada Corporation may use its own vehicle, Dream Chaser, to bring 25 experiments in orbit, etc., etc. Because The partners are coming. This is a growing project, and is probably one of the flagship initiative, one of the most important flagship initiatives, because we really bring people in having hands-on experience. Next one, please. Clearly, the access to space for all, but in any case, trying to opening space to everyone allows people really to understand how to develop space hardware. They learn how to establish commercial businesses, what it means cooperating in space, helping the country to enter into, to become a spacefaring country. And since we are able, thanks to our partners, to offer free of charge the launch cost, so the cost is not paid by the winners of these competitions, well, they can access space in this manner. Otherwise, it would have been impossible to cover from their own pocket the associated costs for launching even one unit CubeSat. The next one, please. Yeah, here you have just some pictures. The first satellite was launched with JAXA in 2018. You see on the left-hand side, it is deployed from the deployment mechanism on board the Kibo module. The Kibo module is a Japanese module on the International Space Station. You see the team on the right-hand side, which developed the satellite, and you see also the flags, because the other two were one unit CubeSat paid by the customers, but Kenya was the one provided through us. And so in this manner, Kenya in 2018 launched its first ever satellite, and so they became a spacefaring country. And the next one, please. Before we go into space economy, let me tell you that last year we had Guatemala becoming also another spacefaring country with the same project, and we even launched during the pandemic. It was the first lockdown period, so we managed together with our Japanese friend to do that. If we talk about space economy, and space economy is strongly linked to sustainability, because the more we go towards commercial entities, the more we need to preserve space, because otherwise it will be more and more difficult for these entrepreneurs to find investors and to have a solid business plan. So we started to focus on space economy series and trying to ensure long-term prosperity. And so we had in 2020 7 webinars covering from access to finance to how to scale up, and also how space economy can support the post-COVID-19 recovery phase. We got in this first attempt 1,500, more than 1,500 people from around the globe. And so this was really a first example of something extremely interesting. And we are planning to reinforce this initiative. We are looking for donors and investors on this project to become bigger and bigger and be able to serve more and more countries. Next one, please. I already mentioned Space for Women, and I already mentioned that this is a project that we created after 2015, and is targeting SDG 4 and 5. It's really trying to facilitate access to the benefits of space exploration, science and technology, and focusing a lot on STEM education, because we do believe that STEM fields are fundamental to help countries to develop in a sustainable manner. And so we have also developed a mentoring platform and a Space for Women network, because in this manner we can put senior women in contact with young girls and women, and so we can also support them not only in deciding which kind of topic they want to study at the university, but also try to support them at least in the early stage of their career development. And clearly, we are also creating a database where we want to put, data, publish research, do a little bit of knowledge management, etc., etc. Obviously, we do always capacity building and training. We also communicate opportunities on STEM education so that we can help through this to access to space education and careers. And we really would like to empower young women and girls to be the beneficiary of space solutions and find space as their way of life, as we did, as I did. Next one. For us also, it's extremely important to have the youngest to be heard, and also because we link STEM fields to the fact that is there where you can find the future of job markets. You know that one of the main challenges that humanity is facing is the future of jobs, in particular in this situation. So we have to retrain, we have to reskill, we have to really change the way in which we think training will not be only at the very beginning of the career of every one of us, but it will continue throughout the career of everyone. And this is not only true for women, it is true for everyone. But as you know, even in this field, women may need to be supported more. And so we also combine sometimes the youth and the gender sides in our initiatives. And we partnered with the Space Generation Advisory Council. Space Generation Advisory Council is a global organization dealing with space activities. And in order to be a member, you need to have an age which is below 35 years. You need to be less than 35 years old. But in SGSC, there are really plenty of skilled and enthusiastic colleagues, young. And so we want really to share through SGSC the possibility for them to have a voice. And so every year we have a competition. We select 3 winners, and with the support of donors, we are able to send these winners either to attend the International Astronautical Congress or to attend other events. We are targeting this year the COP26 Youth, which should take place at the end of September, beginning of October in Milan, Italy, because the real COP26 will take place in Glasgow in, I believe, in December. And so the competition this year is focusing on climate action. So it's Space for Youth competition together with the SGSC, so Space Generation Advisory Council, in agreement with COP26 Youth and with donors, which could support us in bringing the winners physically in presence to Milan for COP26 Youth. You see, every time we put together several stakeholders for the benefit of someone. And clearly this is possible, first of all, because we are a credible organization. Second, because we try always to partner with the right stakeholders, depending on the moment. And also because we foster international cooperation on everything. And so this is then paid in terms of credibility and also possibility then to provide opportunities for a lot of potential interest users all over the world. Next one, please. And so just to close, the main, if you want to summarize the main mandate of the office, is really to bring the benefits of space to everyone everywhere so that no one is left behind. I believe that there is still a lot to be done in bridging the space divide and the digital divide also, but and we are really working actively with all our stakeholders and member states to get more and more attention on our, on, let's say, the various on the portfolio of our initiatives. And every time we succeed, even if it's a young team from Thailand, which won, for example, the competition we did for the European Space Agency facility, or ZARM, the drop tower, or the experiments on board the China space station, or the satellites launched thanks to our agreement with JAXA, or this youth, related activities where every year we bring 3 winners to important events for space, which help them also to get in touch with other experts, and so to enlarge their knowledge and their network and their experience, is something that we are very proud of. And the reward of our activity is in what we see really happening in terms of supporting long-term sustainability. As I said, long-term sustainability in space and long-term sustainability on Earth. And thank you very much.
Simonetta, thank you so much for that lovely presentation and to learn about all the different initiatives and programs that are being at UNOOSA. We've got lots of questions, so I'm just going to get started, if that's okay. So we've got one question. How can we develop sustainable finance methods to improve access to space for emerging spacefaring nations?
Well, this is one of the reasons why, and I invite you to go on our website and look at the space economy webpage. The site, because one of the modules, one of the 7 webinars was exactly how to access finance, and how, well, the point is that you need to have a stable environment, and this is what we are focusing on, in order to have investors which are, how can I say, they're more on the safe side, is they invest their money, their own money, in activities in space if they know that there is a certain regulatory environment, that everything is shared, that space traffic management is developed. So in order to better support this part, so financing and investing and things like that, we strongly believe that we do need to ensure the long-term sustainability. So if you want, it's a sort of a loop, because you cannot develop a stronger space economy if you don't have a stable environment. And so that's the reason why we are really focusing on increasing awareness. And my experience is that until now, that the private sector is really interested in following. What they are asking for is a bit of, you know, a speedy approach. So not long discussions. Long discussions are always good, but they want something concrete. They want rules to follow, to be followed. And that's the reason why I'm also trying to bring everyone at the same table, so that member states and delegations can listen themselves to the needs of the private sector, in particular in developing countries. Also, we had another example that I can make. We've been in contact with Oman. It's one example, plenty of them. And they want us to help them in creating a certain number of startups with the public funds in the space of field and in the field of space. And this is extremely important because it's another angle, and with the approach we are having, we can customize our activities for Oman in particular and help them creating a certain number of startups. So important is that we get a requirement from the member states in question. They ask us, we have this problem, how you can solve it through space. If we have a solution already, fine. If we don't, we have a network, we have the expertise, we have the knowledge to define a specific solution, space-based for them. That's what we do. So it's quite creative also, I have to say. If you think of something boring, no, it's every day is something new because the problem is different. So I don't know, Fiji may have a problem of relocating hundreds of villages due to the sea level rise. And Oman wants instead to develop space, starting from creating a certain number of startups. So you see the kind of questions we receive in terms of support and capacity building and training can be completely different.
Okay. Wow, it's a really wide spectrum of things. That
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's fascinating.
Every company has its own needs. Great, thank you so much. Are there any expectations for the update of the sorry of the update of the guidelines on space debris to include private companies? And what are the plans to update aspects of liability and private companies taking responsibility in terms of space debris?
This is more complex and is in the hands of member states. So what I can tell you from my perspective is that member states are really interested in working more and more on the long-term sustainability. We unfortunately in 2020 had to wait a little bit because the COVID-19 didn't allow us to run the regular COPO session. So we are really eager to see what can happen this year. Unfortunately, for the time being, COPOS has been postponed of a couple of months, so it will go in August. Hopefully in August, we will be able at least to have an hybrid type of meeting. But there are so many important topics to discuss that member states would like to be in the same room. And this is also part of the, let's say, it's one of the sides of diplomacy that requires really to have the same people in the same room, because it's not what they say officially during the statements, but it's what they can discuss aside, of the records outside the meeting room. And then they come back and then they have already agreements. And so that's the way in which we can have here in Vienna what we call the let's say the Vienna spirit and the Vienna approach, where everything is approved by consensus. So we don't vote, which means that you need to have 95 member states in agreement on every single word in the report that we produce every year for COPO. So as you can imagine, is quite a titanic activity, but it gives you also the feeling that even if you don't have a treaty and you have soft law like the guidelines, then the process for approving the guidelines is so strong in a way that every country is then committed to fulfill this. And for the time being, and I don't expect this to change soon, the responsibility will be in the hands of member states, which means that if the private sector entity wants to launch 12,000 satellites, Elon Musk in this case, has to get the license from SEC, as needs to follow the guidelines, etc., etc. So that's the rule.
All right, that's a really interesting insight into the diplomacy aspect of it. So it seems like the tangential meetings that you have on the side helped catalyze.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I have to tell you, if I may, just a brief, let's say, a side comment. COVID-19 and the impact on our day-by-day life gave us the possibility to do what I was advocating since long. Because when you have to reach experts from developing countries, not necessarily all of them can travel. Few of them we can cover the travel costs, but only few of them. So the meetings were 120, 150 people, still a huge number, right? But okay. Now, with the possibility, with the new platforms, virtual platforms, we have been able to reach 1,000, 1,200 each event. So you see, it's one order of magnitude. So it's not big. So for certain kind of activities, it's even better because you don't need to travel. You can attend more events. You can be present more than before because you don't have to travel. However, On the diplomacy side, we experience quite a bit of a problem because member states are not ready to take decisions online. And I understand that, because when you have to decide everything by consensus, probably you need to see the others face to face, all of them, or to have smaller groups, many more like-minded. So it's quite an interesting composition. I mean, it arrives, I mean, the process is complex. It's quite interesting, by the way, but it cannot be done in online. That's the reality.
Absolutely. I mean, there's an added layer to diplomacy that only really occurs when you meet face to face and you sit.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you need to know the people. You need to understand what your counterpart needs to bring back home, because in order to find a compromise, you need to understand, to be in the shoe. I mean, to try to put yourself in the shoes of the counterpart if you really want to find compromise, because otherwise, if you stay in the respective positions without understanding each other, you will never find a compromise. And if you have to find a compromise for 95 member states with 95 different starting points, I mean, well, and you can imagine in New York is the same, because it's 193 member states, but they vote. So at a certain point in time, there is a stop, because they have the voting procedure as part of their procedure. The committee decided not to, the committee, and here in Vienna, they decided to have this more, diplomatic spirit, as I call the Vienna spirit. So we don't vote.
I see. Wow, that's really, really interesting. Thank you so much
for
that. Some questions sort of relate to what you've already sort of explained. How do small satellites that do not have or have a limited capability to maneuver, how do they affect space debris collision scenarios?
Well, this is an interesting field. A few years ago, together with ITU, International Unit, we issued even a sort of a small brochure explaining what the developers of CubeSats should have done in order to try to mitigate the creation of space debris. The general comment that you can hear around is that the CubeSats stay in orbit, in particular if they're there, I mean, in low Earth orbit, just for a short period of time, and then they re-enter the atmosphere naturally. And since they are very small, they completely burn in the re-entry phase, which is true. However, I believe that the more we go towards miniaturization, the more it will be feasible to have some sort of control of this satellites for a control re-entry, because a control re-entry is one of the topics on which from a technical perspective, I believe is the one of the key features that satellites should have on board. However, we had, for example, a case of a satellite, the European Space Agency. They put everything in place, all the measures, the fuel on board, everything was done following 100% the space debris mitigation guidelines, so perfect. However, they made a mistake in calculating the amount of fuel on board. And so, at a certain point in time, they were ready for the re-entry maneuver, but they didn't have fuel. And so the satellite started to tumbling in orbit, and it was impossible to bring it down. So you have also to consider that even when you do everything that you had to do, I mean, really then the European Space Agency is very, very precise on everything. But then, okay, oh, sorry, fuel. No, like in the car, I said, oh my God, I need to find a oil station, because otherwise I cannot continue driving. Yes, more or less the same. And it's still there. It's called MVSAT. It's still there. It's a huge beast. And ESA also put in place some actions or some studies to see if it was possible to send another satellite, grasp it, break it back because it's quite a big beast. So you see, it's space is something complex, and even if now you see a lot of back and forth, astronauts, private astronauts, and plenty of satellites launched, going to space is always not so easy as it sounds.
Absolutely, great, thank you. Are there any policies to improve member state resource sharing rather than just having more launches on a national level?
Well, this is already done. For example, if you consider the GNSS, so Global Navigation Satellite Systems, you have only few systems. You have GPS, you have Galileo, European GPS is American, Galileo is European, GLONASS is Russian, and Beidou is Chinese. But the signal is free. So if you are in Burkina Faso, you can receive the signal and you can derive your services and applications on the basis of the free signal. Copernicus, which is the European Earth observation constellation, free and open data policy. We, for example, are an authorized user. We can download data, then you need to have the skills to extract the feature from the raw data that you need, but in principle, data are free. And so what we do, for example, we train member states, in particular in the field of disasters, and then we provide images so that they can really use those images, for example, for their civil protection entities in the emergency response phase, et cetera, et cetera. So this is done already a lot. But sending a satellite in orbit, like Kenya and Guatemala, is a sort of, starts a very good development in the country, because then if you launch a satellite, then you have to develop your national space law. And then you need to have your national register. And then you need to have your national entity dealing with all of this. Because you have to register, you have to license the satellite. And Kenya has been so good that even they quite recently notified to us that the satellite re-entered. So the one UniCubeSat that they launched with us in 2018 is now back, destroyed in the atmosphere, but okay, re-entered. And they even notified to us that the satellite re-entered. So it's a good way for us also to train new countries and new players following the rules really 100%. And that's also something that clearly we pay a lot of attention, but I have to say also countries are putting a lot of attention on that. And this satellite, for example, from Kenya was developed by a group of students at the University of Nairobi. So it means that then they came for other masters in other countries. Then they went back to Nairobi. And then they brought a lot of skills and knowledge. And so this helps the country to develop. So it's not only the satellite per se, but it's the added value which brings with it.
I see. So it's a trade-off between data and resource sharing and also building up the space economy in a certain...
Exactly. And again, you have also to consider always the future of jobs. The future of jobs is something that I have always in mind together with climate, because you don't have any field which is in silos with respect to the others. I mean, space is really something across the board. Can help on climate, can help on sustainable development, can help on post-recovery, I mean, in the COVID-19 post-recovery phase, et cetera, et cetera. And the more you can use space to develop economies, to develop, let's say, a country from a socio-economic perspective, the better is. And because it's bringing, technology, innovation is the future in a way. And therefore, you have also more women, girls, boys looking at STEM as a possible field for their future career. And this is where the future of job is, right? So new technologies, artificial intelligence, robotics, biotechnologies, everything is linked to space. Whatever you do in this field, chemistry, everything is linked to that, even architecture now. So in reality, or 3D printing, it's really everything you want to do on Earth as an application in space and the other way around. So it's a field where you can really build the sustainability of a country in socioeconomic terms.
And so it's such a holistic field from a technological point of view that there's so much room for technology transfer to terrestrial applications as well and afterwards. So
absolutely, absolutely. I always make the example of the Mars City. Mars City is a project of the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center in Dubai, and is a town that they are planning to build 3D printed with the sand of the desert. And if you compare this to Mars, and if you are able to build a city which is fully sustainable on Earth, even if it's the desert of Dubai, then you can do it in space. Or you can learn how to do it in space and do it on Earth. Or, for example, agriculture. There are a certain number of technologies which have been developed for space to support astronauts in a long planetary mission to Mars or whatever, or beyond. That kind of technologies can be used on Earth, and then you see the vertical agriculture, the smart agriculture, the use of various new technologies to help farmers, etc., etc. So it's a cross-fertilization which works, in my opinion, very well.
Great, thank you. So we're starting to run out of time. So
yeah,
one last question. Thank you so much for your time. What would be your advice? This is something we tend to ask all of our speakers. What would be your advice for people who want to have a career in space?
Well, in reality now, as I said, there are a lot of different fields which converge, because in the future you may have medical doctors, engineers, scientists, psychologists, also architects, but also, you know, civil engineers. Lawyers, because clearly when we will have an outpost on the moon, also lawyers will be needed, because there will be, I don't know if you're reading all these tweets in messages sent by Elon Musk, and he wants to create a sort of a new state on Mars. It's okay, I know him quite well, is wonderful guy, but so sometimes a little bit futuristic, but it's something that in reality is true. I mean, so biology also, and IT, robotics, really, whatever, there are a lot of fields which really converge in space. And then my personal experience is that since the very beginning of my career, I wanted to have a job which would have allowed me to study every day, to learn every day. If you want to keep pace with what is happening in space, you need to learn every day, you need to read every day, you need to understand what is going on. It's a global work, because you have job, because you have friends and colleagues everywhere. And so it's not a real job, it's a way of life. And so when you have the way, this also helps you in maintaining the passion I still have after 35 years in the field, and also the energies that I still have in my day-by-day life. So my suggestion is, do what you feel is fitting. Don't listen to anyone telling you, oh, no, you cannot make it, or because you're a woman, I mean, forget about. It was, I don't know how many times I heard that, and I simply don't care. I believe that everyone has to do what he or she wants. And again, it's mandatory to do something during your working life that is giving you a reward, not because someone else is rewarding you, but because you feel rewarded by what you do. And that's been my case. So in a way, I feel privileged of being able to do what I like after 35 years of my career. So do it. Try to do it.
Sure.
Follow your mind, your brain, and try to do what you really believe is what you feel comfortable with.
Excellent. That's great advice. Thank you so much. I think we'll have to leave it there, but
yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for answering these questions as well.
And I hope that you like that, and don't hesitate also in the future. If I can support, I'll always do that.
Thank you so much, Simonetta. Really appreciate it.
Okay, my pleasure. Bye. Ciao.